What's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 3 of On The Volley. I'm Paolo Santamaria. My co-host is Kieran Lacey. You've been with us for the past 2 weeks, and this week we have a very exciting lineup, an awesome team of the week, and I'll hand it off to Kieran for the rest.
So we'll also be going through all of the top 5 leagues across Europe, as well as a roundup of the English Football League. We've had midweek games in the Premier League as well, and among other things, we've had some fantastic goals, some great performances, and a few, let's say, controversial moments throughout the last week, and we're gonna be talking about all of them, as well as doing a focus on two teams that are on completely opposite form at the moment, Tottenham and Crystal Palace, as well as taking a look at the current Premier League leaders and discuss whether they can be stopped. But to kick us off with the other leagues in Europe, is of course Paolo with his roundup of the European top leagues.
All right, let's get straight into it. In Ligue 1, we have PSG taking care of business this weekend with a 4-1 win. The trio of Mbappe, Neymar, and Cavani all scored, with Mbappe and Neymar each bagging 2 assists. So that's 4 goals, 4 assists for PSG. Absolute masterclass. 55 goals in 18 games. They are absolutely scintillating form. Other than that one loss, which basically is just a one-off, they are the absolute dominant team in Ligue 1. To no one's surprise, Monaco, Lyon, and Marseille are all vying for those top 4 spots, and 2 out of the 3 of them, the one-off being Marseille, picked up wins this weekend. So the table is looking pretty tight, other than PSG, as we move to Germany, where another behemoth, FC Bayern Munich, are doing very well again. They have won 4 straight in a row. Jupp Heynckes has them playing incredible football. Most wins, fewest draws, fewest losses, fewest goals allowed. They are absolutely killing it. But of note, we've got an absolute cracking competition in the rest of the top 6. That's the 2 Europa League places and the rest of the 3 Champions League qualification places. We've got Schalke, Dortmund, Leverkusen, Leipzig, and Mönchengladbach, all on either 30 or 28 points. Very tight race up there. Dortmund are looking very good. New coach under the helm. They've won 2 in a row. They're unbeaten in 4 out of their last 5. So we'll see how that shakes up. It looks like Bayern's league, again with Man City, they both have 11-point leads at the top of the table. Don't see that changing anytime soon. In Serie A, we talked about it last week, but it's the most competitive title race in all of European football. We've got a very, very shocking result this weekend. That's FC Inter Milan. They dropped their first game of the season. They are no longer on an Invincibles run. They lost 1-3 to Udinese. Unfortunate game. Icardi scored to start off the game. Looked like another Inter win, but then they got beaten pretty bad on the back end. And so they're now in 3rd place because Juventus and Napoli have taken storm, winning big games this weekend. And Napoli are in the lead at 42 points, Juventus 41, Inter Milan with 40, Roma with 38. Very, very tight title race. Any of those 4 teams could win it. The rest of it with Lazio and Sampdoria in the Europa League places, not so exciting. And then we have another title race, which is looking competitive, but not quite as competitive as Serie A, and that's La Liga. We got Barcelona winning a 4-0, very, very convincing game. Suarez back on form. Messi hit the woodwork 3 times. But they are on scintillating form, but not as scintillating as Atletico Madrid, who have won 4 games in a row. They've picked up 13 points out of their last 5 games. They're unbeaten, just like Barcelona. They're one of 3 teams left in top 5 football with a chance at the Invincibles run, along with Man City. Valencia have dropped a couple games. They've lost 2 out of their last 3. Real Madrid are finding some form again. And so that's the rest of the top 4. And like Serie A, the Europa League places with Sevilla and Villarreal aren't very tightly contested, with them on 29 and 24 points. Now, of course, in La Liga, to kind of spin off to the side for a moment, I'm sure Kieran will want to comment on this as well, but we have got the biggest derby in all the world, better than the old classic Argentinian derby, better than Liverpool-Manchester United, better than Tottenham-Arsenal. This is El Clasico. It's the rivalry to end all rivalries. The 2 most successful teams in all of football history. It's FC Barcelona, Real Madrid, Saturday, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. GMT. Kieran, what are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is big claim that it's the biggest rivalry in football. Big claim. And I'm not sure I agree with you, but I'm not gonna.
I would probably say that 50 to 60% of football fans would agree with me.
I don't think so. I'm sure that many fans, especially in the Football League, there are some big rivalries in the Football League. Obviously, Oxford Swindon is my one. You've got West Ham and Millwall. You've got Nottingham Forest and Notts County. Actually, that one's not so big anymore because they're so far apart. And as well, if you were to go internationally, England, Scotland. I mean, it's football's oldest game.
Well, club football. If we're talking club football. We're talking club football. These are literally two of the four biggest teams in the world.
Yeah. And I think at the moment it's one of the big rivalries, but the thing is, it's because they're arguably the two biggest teams in the world.
Yeah. I would say of the 21st century. 21st century, it's been the biggest derby. Galacticos in the 80s, I mean, also still a big rivalry. I mean, it's the history of it. I mean, it's an outlandish claim. I know La Liga gets a lot of flack, but the best players to ever play football have mostly either played for Real Madrid or FC Barcelona. And I think that's what makes it such a special derby.
Yeah. I think my problem with El Clasico is every time I've watched it, which is 3 times now, it's been a really, really bad game. And I think...
Did you not watch last year's where Messi won in stoppage time?
No, because the ones that I'd watched before that had been so bad. I think it was... the worst one I've ever seen, it was... Oh, what year would it have been? 2000
You talking about Pep's Barcelona, where they just destroyed them?
No, it was 2015, and I can't remember what the score was, but I just remember neither team looked up for it. Neither team seemed to want to try, and it was a really bizarre game. It felt like it was like a preseason friendly because both teams were really quite poor.
Right, there was a 2-1 win to Barcelona and then a 4-0 win to Barcelona in 2015.
I imagine. What were the dates of those?
We got one in March and then one in November.
And the 2-1 was March.
The 2-1 was March, yeah.
Okay, it would have been that one. But yeah, just neither team seemed to care, and like it was crazy when you went on Twitter during that game because it was like 50% of people watching the game saying how amazing it was, and clearly were just bigging it up because it was the El Clasico, and then the other 50%, people that actually watched the football rather than the event were just saying how dire the game was. And yeah, I think that game put me off, and then I've seen a couple of others that I think the problem with the El Clasico, and it's a problem that isn't necessarily a bad problem, is the two teams are they're too evenly matched. You don't have with the Premier League at the moment, you have individual brilliance in teams. With Man City, it's De Bruyne. With Chelsea, it's Hazard. With Liverpool, it's Salah. And what you have with Madrid and Barca, although they have those players in, Ronaldo and Messi, the rest of the team, they're not exactly slacking in comparison, which you do get in the Premier League sometimes. And I think the problem is neither team wants to lose that game because it's the El Clasico. And because of that, it always turns into like a cagey game. I think normally it normally ends up being a really bad game or a game where someone just completely destroys the other one.
Last year was definitely a one-off, I have to say, the tightness of that game. That's because the league race was so close last year, I think. But my take for this game, probably, against yours, is that Real Madrid are 11 points back. I mean, sure, they have a game in hand. They had to take the weekend off because of the Club World Cup, which they won. But they are 11 points back. They can catch Valencia. If they win, they'll be up on goal differential. If they win by 2-0, they'll be up on goal differential. So they're going to want to play more open. I mean, for the first time, Zidane has his whole squad at his selection. Bale's finally fit. He's doing good things. Ronaldo's found his form back. Benzema's still not. But, I mean, they've not really needed him to score as much. So I think Madrid are going to play more open. They're going to play a very positive game. And Barcelona are going to show off they're going to show off with what they can do for the first time this year. I think they're going to see a team not play defensively. I mean, when they played Atletico Madrid, they sat back, and Barcelona had their chances, but Oblak is an amazing keeper, probably second best keeper in the world right now, and that was 1-1. That was 0-0, I believe. And now you got Madrid, Barcelona. Madrid need to come at them, and Barcelona, they're not going to be as strong defensively because Umtiti's out. They're going to have to make some move. Paco Alcacer is out too. I know he's kind of one of their pressing strikers, pressing forwards. So it should be a really good game. Hopefully, we'll see something exciting to appease the neutral viewer. Sucks for us fans in the U.S. I mean, 7 a.m. I could kind of make that work, but if you live on the West Coast in the U.S., no chance you're watching this game unless you
especially
tape it.
Especially 2 days before Christmas as well.
Yeah,
it's really it's a bizarre choice of fixture. Yeah. It really is.
It's great for the local fans. I mean, 1 p.m. start time in Spain. Go out, drink, have a nice lunch, get to the game. But I'm excited. It should be good. I mean, it's the first really big name. I guess. I mean, we had the Manchester Derby, which obviously we talked about last week, and that was. I don't want to say. I would say it was a disappointment from a neutral fan's perspective. It was very disappointing. But hopefully, with this, we'll see something exciting. We'll give something to the fans. I mean, big game. Obviously, Dortmund Bayern is up on the horizon as well. So this should be very, very exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. If you had to make a prediction, what would you make? Final score?
I think that because Real Madrid have to come out and they have to attack because they've got a big points gap to make up, that Barcelona are going to take advantage of it, and I think they're going to win 3-1.
That is exactly what I would have said. No kidding. 3-1. I was going to say 3-1. Wow. With some Messi assists, Iniesta magic. Ronaldo gets either a cheeky pen or a cheeky tap in for the one goal.
A cheeky pen from a cheeky dive, maybe?
Cheeky, obviously. It's La Liga. Everyone dives. But
yeah,
the tactical brilliance will be on display. 3-1 Barcelona. Book it. They'll extend their lead to potentially 9 points. Almost as much as the leaders, Manchester City of the Premier League, which we'll get to right after our EFL Roundup.
Yes, so our EFL Roundup, in case you missed it last week, is every week I will pick a story from each of the 3 EFL leagues, the Championship, League 1, League 2, as well as an EFL Player of the Week, who will also be featured in our Team of the Week at the end of the show. So we're going to start off with the Championship, and we've had the end of an unbelievable run in the Championship that's also extended in the Premiership, and it's unbelievable in a bad way. For those of you who are fans of English football will know that Sunderland last season had a really, really, really terrible season in the Premier League, got relegated, went into the Championship, and have had a terrible season in the Championship thus far. But in the 77th minute of their game on the 364th day, Sunderland ended their winless run at home with 18-year-old Josh Maja scoring the winner in a 1-0 win against Fulham. 364 days. If they didn't win on the weekend's game, they would have gone over a year without winning at home.
That is incredible.
Which is just an unbelievable stat, because teams are supposed to be better at home. It's their fortress. It's where all their fans go, and Sunderland have had a hard time of things recently. Last season they had a really poor team in the Premier League. Only really Defoe was the only sort of shining light, and then he straight away went and left because
why would you
stay in the Premier League.
Pickford, they lost Pickford too.
And they lost Pickford too. Those two were the only two players that really covered themselves in any kind of glory last season. Obviously, they both left, and I think a couple of other players probably moved on as well. I don't actually know much about their team at the moment, I'll be honest. And so it's been a difficult period. We also had, out of Sunderland, the incredible story of Bradley Lowry as well, which I think was sort of the shining light coming out of Sunderland.
It's a nice pun
in
with
sort of
light,
their dark times.
Sunderland. Nice.
Yeah. It wasn't on purpose, but we'll take it. And I think that really off the field has been sort of more important to Sunderland recently than on the field, with things like Bradley Lowry and things like that. And yeah, so that's a great result for them, that they finally ended this winless run. Of course, they've stolen the former Wales manager Chris Coleman from the Welsh national side. He decided not to carry on as Wales manager after they failed to qualify for the World Cup, which was a really disappointing result for them. And I think Wales did brilliantly in the Euros, and then they had quite a tough group, and it just didn't line up. And unfortunately, Chris Coleman then left his post as Wales manager, which I think is a shame, because I think he's a very good manager, and I think honestly he could do better than. I don't want to be rude to Sunderland fans, but given where they are in comparison to some other teams that had vacancies at the same time, I think he could have gone into one of those Premier League sides. He
could have, but I think the challenge of getting Sunderland back into the Premier League is a good one, and I think Coleman is up for the task. I mean, you saw what he did with Wales.
I think that's what the appeal was. I think with Chris Coleman, he's worked in the Championship a lot. He's got a little bit of experience in the Premier League as well. I think part of his, what he did with Wales, he came in at the most difficult time after the death of Gary Speed, and Wales, they were really in turmoil. It was just a really dark time for Welsh football. He came in and he steadied the ship. He took his time with it as well, which I think was sort of a credit to the Welsh FA that they let him take his time with it. And we ended up with the incredible run at the Euros a few years ago, or last year rather.
A few years ago.
2018, okay? Not 2018 yet. It's not 2018 just yet. It's nearly, but not quite. Yeah, and I think that's sort of the appeal of the Sunderland job. I think he sees it as a project in a similar vein, where he's coming in at a really sort of turbulent time for the club, and he can take his time with it, build it up, and really push it to where it needs to be. Because, in my opinion, Sunderland should be a Premier League club.
They should.
They were there for so long, and they had a really sort of... They just became the team that escaped relegation, which is sort of what Swansea are doing at the moment, and I think Swansea are going to go the way of Sunderland this season. But I think he could have gone in at a higher level, but I think the possibility of being able to start from lower down and build up was what attracted him to that job.
Yeah, and we'll definitely keep monitoring that throughout the season.
Yeah. On to League One, and the big sort of talking point game from League One was came from Peterborough and Fleetwood. Fleetwood scored in the 82nd minute. A Kieran Bolger goal made it look like they were going to win the game. It made it 2-1, and with 8 minutes to go, you'd have been forgiven for thinking that Peterborough were down and out. But then in the 88th and the 90th minute, Peterborough scored to take the game 3-2. Incredible scenes, 2 minutes, 2 goals, and they went from, the trip home with nothing to the trip home with a fantastic earned 3 points. So that was the big talking point from League One. And in League Two, it was just a fairly standard day in League Two. So it was quite difficult to find like a standout story. And the one I've chosen isn't just because I'm an Oxford fan, but it is quite a nice story for me as an Oxford fan.
To the detriment.
Swindon.
To the detriment of a team.
Swindon Town. Yes. Swindon Town. They have extended their losing streak to 5 games.
That's horrible.
As Colchester beat them by 3-2, with Mikael Mandron scoring a 78th minute winner, heading in a Kyle Reid free kick. I'm not the sort of person that thinks big on rivalries. In my opinion, I like it when Oxford beat Swindon, and it happens so often nowadays. But at the same time, no one wants to see a team in that sort of horrible position. But at the moment, Swindon are fairly safe in League Two, so it is kind of nice.
Very nice. Very nice. And now, before we get to our Team of the Week later in the show, we want to give them our EFL Player of the Week that you picked out.
Yes, and we've gone in defence this time because
we've been attack-minded the past couple of weeks, I think.
Yeah, and I think something that people often hone in on is the attackers. They're the ones that score the goals, get the glory, and it's rare that a defender puts in a performance that really sort of changes the course of a game and wins you the game effectively. Normally it's defensive wise, it's the keeper that gets applauded. It's like David De Gea for Manchester United against Arsenal. But Keogh for Derby over the weekend scored a goal and made a goal line clearance. Assisted a goal, rather, and made a goal line clearance in the Midlands derby against Aston Villa. So they ended up winning that game, and everyone likes to win a derby, but when your defenders, saving the day with the goal line clearance and helping out at the other end by assisting a goal, it's always a great feeling.
And now that's put Derby 4 points clear of Aston Villa. They're encroaching on that automatic promotion spot held by Cardiff. They're 6 points back. Third in goal differential in the league. So that's very interesting in the Championship. Like you always say, Championship is the most competitive league in the world. And it's looking like that this year, right along with Serie A.
I think most people that pay attention to football outside the top 5 leagues will agree that the Championship is the most competitive league. I think this season is one of the least competitive that we've seen in recent times, with Wolves and Cardiff sort of both playing very well and both sort of holding on to those top 2 spots. But it's always very competitive in the Championship, and I think every team coming down from the Premier League fears going down to the Championship because they know, I mean, it's happened before so many times where teams have gone down from the Premier League and for whatever reason they end up going further and further down. It happened with Southampton, they end up in League One. Leicester ended up in League One. Obviously they're both back up in the Premier League now, but doesn't always go that way. Charlton have been a yo-yo club between League One and the Championship. Now you've got teams like Coventry, Portsmouth ended up down in League Two. So it really is, like, the Championship is a really rough league
tough.
to be in.
It's a death sentence almost.
Yeah, if you can establish yourself as a strong Championship team, which a lot of teams have done, teams like Reading, who they've had a couple of flirts with the Premier League, but they're a solid Championship club. Nottingham Forest made a great escape last season, but they've been in the Championship for a while and sort of, flirting with the Premier League one season, then League One the next. But I think the Championship is the hardest league in not in terms of, obviously, if Messi were to go to the Championship, he'd rip it apart. But in terms of, given the skill level of the players, I'd say it's the hardest league in the world.
Because you do have all the players pretty much on an even level. I mean, I guess really the only player that has stood out to me this year has been Ruben for Wolves, who could literally start for so many Premier League teams. And if they don't get promoted, I mean, which would obviously be a great travesty, he's going to leave. But, I mean, like you said, when you're like a Sunderland and you finally make that fall, when you're like what Swansea's about to do, you're going to see every Premier League player, a Premier League quality player, just leave. And
I think the advantage that Swansea have, and it sounds horrible, and my old teacher at university would kill me if she heard me say this, so I hope she's not listening. I don't think that Swansea have many, if any, Premier League quality players in their squad.
You're telling me that Wilfred Boney is not a Premier League quality player? I
mean, he did well in the Premier League for Swansea, went to Manchester City, didn't go well, he's gone back to Swansea, and it's going okay. It's not going badly, I think. But the thing is, he's already left once, and it didn't go to plan, so I think he would probably rather stay with Swansea and go down and try and fight to come back up. They lost Llorente to Spurs, Swansea, and I think that was a big hit because they lost their goals, and Bonny hasn't quite hit the ground running. Tammy Abraham's doing well, but he's not scoring too many goals, and I think they are in desperate need of a 20-goal-a-season striker. But the problem is the January transfer window is not known for 20-goal-a-season strikers being available for anything less than 50 million. Yeah.
Oh, they do have the Gylfi money.
They do have that's the thing. They do have the money. It's just whether they spend it.
They have to.
And
they've never been relegated.
That money,
they have. At least in the Premier League, in the era of the Premier League, they've never been relegated.
Yeah. I think the thing is, a lot of clubs nowadays, it happens a lot of the time, is they sell a player, they make big money, and fans expect, oh, okay, so we've just made this money, let's go and spend it now. But so many clubs nowadays have a lot of debt. The owners have put a lot of their own money into the club and then suddenly want to recoup that. And so, 45 million is probably more like 20 million. And when you consider bringing in Wilfred Bonny, who was probably on a very healthy wage at Man City, and they're probably going to have to be paying most, if not all, of that wage that he was on at Man City to lure him back, suddenly that money's getting less and less. And as well as bringing in Tammy Abraham, I imagine they'll be paying most, if not all, of his wages as well. And, he's a Chelsea player, so his wages are going to be quite high. And, it happens quite a lot of the time. And sometimes it goes the other way, like with Tottenham when they sold Gareth Bale. They got a very healthy amount of money for him, and they spent pretty much all of it on players, and they had a really bad season the season following, and most of those players were flops. But and Swansea they lost at the weekend as well. They lost midweek rather. They play
today.
They play
Everton
tonight.
They will play
as
during the
we're
recording. Yeah.
And the thing with Swansea is they were very close to going down last season. Brought in Paul Clement. He did a great job and sort of rescued them. But I think the thing is, like, it's a very close season this season. Like, when you look at the league table, even those sort of towards the top, other than Man City, aren't actually that far from the relegation zone points-wise. It's very close in that sort of, especially from sort of 6 down to sort of 17, it's very, very close. And when I look at every team in that cluster, and I think, okay, if we were to match up all these teams against each other, I don't think there's any team that I would favour Swansea against.
Yeah, I think this might be the end for them. It's just them and West Brom, and they've been in the both of them have been in the Premier League for a while. Like we said, Swansea's never been relegated, but I think this is kind of the end for both those clubs.
It's tough. It is tough because for both those sides, they're sides that you sort of just have come to sort of expect them in the Premier League, and it was the same with Sunderland. But at the same time, there's nothing better than when you get a team like Brighton or Huddersfield come up. You know, Huddersfield, they've got a fantastic pass in the top division, but it was a long, long time ago that they had that fantastic pass. And it's great to see these teams come up and do really well in the Premier League. Because it's always great to see new blood, and it brings in these new players as well. You know, both of them have brought in players that were Championship players last season and are now doing well in the Premier League. You know, one of them's made our Team of the Week. He's had a season on loan at Huddersfield. We're not going to spoil who it is, but I'm sure you can guess who it's going to be. And he's doing really well in the Premier League, and I think that's one of the advantages of you know, these teams that aren't Premier League yo-yo clubs, sort of like West Brom were for a while before they became more established. Like sort of Newcastle have been to an extent recently, is you're not seeing the same players being brought in and out of the Premier League. You're seeing new players, you're seeing fresh faces, that sort of thing. And I think that's good, but it is a shame when you see teams that have become quite established as Premier League clubs sort of drop back down.
Yeah, exactly. And that'll definitely take us right into our Premier League roundup. Obviously, Kieran just mentioned that Swansea did lose midweek. They're playing, as we're recording, against Everton. So, where to start? Midweek, couple recaps. A lot of goals across the Premier League. We had 3 teams 4 times bag in 4 goals between the 4 game days. Man City bagged 4 goals twice. Huddersfield did it once, and Liverpool did it once as well. Huddersfield had a great midweek win. They were able to take down... They had a great Saturday win. They were able to take down Watford in a game that was 10v10. We had Liverpool finish 4-0 against Bournemouth. They are now 4th in the table. Arsenal had a bit of a cheeky 1-0 win against Newcastle, who are actually in the worst form of any Premier League team. They've lost 4 out of their last 5, including the last 4 in a row. Burnley have snuck into a very comfortable 6th place. They probably should be in 5th right now, if not for Arsenal's cheeky win against Newcastle, like we just mentioned. Burnley also probably should have beaten Brighton. Tottenham, which we'll get to later, have had quite a shocking week. They did okay in the middle of the week.
Got a 2-0 win against Brighton.
Yeah, but then absolutely collapsed against Man City. The players were going crazy. The ref missed probably 3, maybe even 4 red cards. So we'll get to that later. That's one of our featured talking points. But Leicester, they lost their wonderful streak. They won 4 in a row before losing 3-0 to Palace due to a very unfortunate red card quite early on, about 30 minutes left against Wilfred Ndidi. Basically, we saw the top six, the big six, if you will, other than Tottenham, take care of business. Arsenal got their wins, Chelsea, Liverpool. Liverpool had an unfortunate draw in the middle of the week against West Brom. Not the kind of thing you want to do when you're trying to take over the third spot. Man U took care of business. They were able to batter in some goals against West Brom, and everything pretty much stayed the same. Big shout out to Palace, who are unbeaten in their last 5 games. Roy Hodgson has taken this team from what looked like a surefire relegation contender, literally lost their first, what is it? They lost their first 8 games. They didn't have a goal through 8 games. They fired the manager, rightfully so, and now they're on this incredible winning streak. They look safe from relegation, if any team can be safe from relegation. But yeah.
Well, I think what we've seen with the Premier League this season is that form is everything, because Everton were in terrible form and Palace were in terrible form, and they both look like they're in a major relegation scrap. They bring in new managers, they go on some good runs, and now both of them are way higher up the table. Yeah. And I think, it's as I was saying, the Premier League this season, in terms of the mid-table down to the relegation zone, is very, very close this season.
It's fascinating.
It is. Also, West Ham as well. They have got some good results recently. They beat Chelsea last weekend. They got a 0-0 draw with Arsenal in midweek, and then smashed 3 past Stoke, including Marko Arnautovic running riot against the side he left for £20 million in the summer. And that was an interesting watch, because you could just see, I don't know why there was so much anger from him towards the Stoke fans. The Stoke fans were quite rude to him, to be blunt. Mm-hmm. But that's just the nature of football. When a player forces a move to another club, he tends to get booed when he comes back. But it was really bizarre to see how he reacted. It was almost like he'd been playing for Palace playing for West Ham for years and years, and came back and was still getting booed, and was like, look, I'm a West Ham player, I love this club, but it's like, you've been there for 5 months, 6 months, and your first half of the first quarter of the season, you were abysmal.
He had a lot to say. He had a lot to say to the Stoke fans.
Yeah, but he, as much as his attitude was very much a big middle finger to the Stoke fans, the way he played was an even bigger one, because he was fantastic.
He was. And Stoke are in free fall. Butland is probably on the way out. I think Stoke will get relegated. I can see Newcastle climbing out of their hole. Benitez is just too good of a manager to let them fall. Mm-hmm. So it'll probably be Stoke, West Brom, Swansea.
I think it'll depend on whether... Mike Ashley is trying to sell Newcastle at the moment. If this deal goes through, with the investors that are trying to buy Newcastle at the moment, and then they can, give some guarantees to Rafa and say to him, look, January transfer window, here's 30 million quid, go and buy yourself a star player or a couple of squad players or whatever, do what you want to do in the transfer window, then Newcastle will be fine.
2 weeks. But I think 2 weeks until the transfer window.
Yeah, but I think if the deal falls through, or if it gets delayed and Rafa doesn't get that backing in the January transfer window, Newcastle, they're in this incredible position that they've got this fantastic manager, a manager who should be a much higher club. He's managed Chelsea, he's managed Real Madrid, he's managed Liverpool, he's managed all these.
He's won Champions League. He is one of the best managers in the world.
Yeah, and it's like, he wasn't very liked at Chelsea because he used to manage Liverpool. He wasn't very liked at Real Madrid because he had sort of a turbulent time. But at the end of the day, he gets the job done, and he's a very good manager. So why? I know Mike Ashley is trying to sell up, and he's really one of the most hated owners in the Football League at the moment.
Yeah, no kidding.
But if he wants to sell up, it's going to be a lot easier if he's still got Rafa at the helm. So I don't understand why he's still, or why he's not doing everything he can to appease Rafa and make Rafa happy, because that club is worth a lot more with Rafa in charge than it would be if Rafa left.
It's also Newcastle.
And they ended up and it's also Newcastle. They're one of the biggest footballing brands in the country. I know that they've had a rough time of it recently, a couple of relegations, things like that. But at the end of the day, they are one of the biggest brands in English football.
Yeah. They're good. They're a great team, and I think that's something to be interested in. But Speaking of managers, how about Roy?
Roy Hodgson, where did this come from? When he was with England, he was constantly labelled, one of the most boring managers in the world. He was never good enough for England, and, I was one of his big critics as well. I was not a fan of Roy as a manager and the way he managed the England side. He came in to England and, sort of like he's done with Palace, came in and actually did a really good job in his first period, because he came in right before Euro 2012. And, we had a decent tournament. And then he's sort of done the same with Palace. He came in and suddenly they're playing really well. And it's like, in my head I'm going, is it going to go the same way? Are they suddenly going to start playing really dull football, with just lots of passing around the defence where, it's just not very exciting and then teams just pick them apart and it's really easy? Or has he figured something out with Palace? Because they're not just grinding out scrappy wins like you get quite often with when a new manager comes in. Often teams will want to impress the new manager and go, look, this is why I should be in the first team, especially sort of the youngsters and the fringe players. But he's not just got scrappy wins. They're playing very well. They're playing good football. He's got Benteke scoring goals. A man who has had some of the worst goal-scoring form I've ever seen in the Premier League. And, Crystal Palace is another one of those teams where you look at the squad and think, is this good enough to be a Premier League side? Benteke used to be incredible at Villa, went to Liverpool, struggled a bit, went to Palace, struggled even more. Johan Cabaye did really well for Newcastle, went to PSG, didn't quite work out, so he moved to Palace. He's sort of probably a Premier League quality player. And then you've got Wilf Zaha, who probably should be playing at a much higher level, but all of that turmoil with Manchester United, which we won't go into. But other than those three,
you've got up and comers though. You've got Townsend, who is establishing himself as a Premier League player now.
I mean, can you call Townsend an up and comer?
I mean,
he's been an up and comer for about 4 years.
I mean, he is 26.
He's like the next Theo Walcott.
I think he is establishing himself now. I mean,
the problem he always had was he was at Tottenham during the days of, so many great wing players, and he broke into the team, started doing really well, and then his form dropped off, and that's when Tottenham started their rise as his form started its fall, and so he just got completely just sort of left out of the picture, and he ended up at Palace. He's had a few good games for them. Weirdly enough, I think he needs to look up to someone younger than him in Zaha, because he's a cracking player.
He's so good,
and
so good.
When I watch him play, it makes me so upset that he decided not to play for England, because he was eligible to play for England, and in the end he decided to go for the Ivory Coast instead, because he's just an exciting player. He's the sort of player that can pop up completely unexpectedly, take on 4 players and score a goal. He's a player that I think if he were to make the step up to a bigger club, or if Palace were to sort of step up and become slightly bigger as a club, but he could be the sort of... I think he's good enough for Champions League football, Zaha.
Oh, he is. And that's the thing with what Roy did. I don't know disrespect to England. Like you're saying, you wish he had played for England, because he's a creative player. He can take players on, he can find the pass, and he's good enough at finishing where he can score goals on his own after he takes on players. And I think what Roy has done is he's built the offense around Zaha. He has this movement with Zaha and Cabaye, Loftus-Cheek, and Townsend, and they're playing positive football. I think that's the most surprising thing. Yes, Big Sam has gotten Everton top half of the table, and he's had some high scoring games, most of which has come from Rooney's help. But you're seeing Palace actually playing positive football, and I don't want to threaten their season, but if Zaha goes down, they're going down too. I mean, I know that they had a spell where he was a little banged up, and the type of play that he has and he does is conducive to getting injured. So if that does happen, I don't know what Palace are going to do, because they don't have anything without him. I think Roy did a major thing by dropping Hennessy, who has just been terrible this season, and that's really helped. The defense is fine. It's not amazing. It's not.
It's nothing. It's nothing to write home about, but it's okay.
It's gonna do the job. But Zaha is what
Yeah.
makes them run. And if he goes
Yeah,
down, I don't know what they're gonna do.
I honestly think if he carries on the way he is, it's only a matter of time before someone like a Barcelona comes knocking. Because I imagine him playing and learning from players like Messi. He would become a world beater. I think he has the potential to become a world beater. Maybe he'd turn out more like some other players that have sort of tried to make that big move to Spain or to Germany or whatever, and it hasn't quite worked out. But I think he has the potential, and he's had some attitude problems in the past, but I think he's matured greatly in the last year or two. And I think if a Champions League team comes knocking, maybe not in January, but especially next summer,
We'll have to look at that.
then I think he will be on his way out of Palace, and they will need to really look at how they can invest. Probably
75 to 80 million. 75 to 80 million.
It depends on whether the inflated prices from Neymar's transfer are still a thing. If they are, maybe they could get 60 to 80 million. If not, probably 30 to 40 million. But still, that's money that they need to reinvest, and they need to be looking maybe even at Championship players. There's some fantastic young attackers in the Championship, and I think Zaha is going to be crucial to their season. They need to keep him fit. They need to keep him firing.
All right. Right now, do Palace stay up? We're about halfway through the season. Do Palace stay up?
I think... it's as we said. If Zaha stays fit and firing, yes. If he doesn't, no.
Yeah, we agree on that one. But it's great to see them doing well. It's always a nice story to see a team. I felt bad for them. 0 wins, 8 games, 0 draws in 8 games. And then now they're...
Not even a goal.
Not even a goal. They haven't even scored. And they did it. So good news to them. But another team on the opposite end of that is Tottenham. Like I alluded to very quickly in the roundup, Tottenham, Man City. We thought that Tottenham had found some form again. They battered Stoke. They put in five goals? And then they had a good win against Brighton, 2-0. Kane's finding some form. Eriksen's playing well. Son's playing well. Of course, they're a little banged up. No Alderweireld. But they now play a test. Man City. Can they do it? They could not do it. No team has been able to do it. But the way they lost was especially embarrassing. Take us through your thoughts.
The main thing with this game is other teams have come up against Manchester City, and although they haven't won the game or got anything out of the game, they've at least come and performed. Manchester United, for all of their faults during that game, they came with a game plan and they tried to execute it. It didn't work, but they came with a game plan. I think that was what was lacking from Tottenham. There didn't seem to be any kind of game plan. And I know they've got some injury issues. Harry Kane's not 100% at the moment, and as you mentioned, Alderweireld is out injured. Davison Sanchez, I think, was still suspended as well for this game. So they had some players out that perhaps they would have had. But at the same time, late in the week, Manchester City lost David Silva. And so they lost sort of the man who creatively had been sort of the driving force along with Kevin De Bruyne in their sort of season so far. And, it didn't affect them at all. And also they've had some major issues in left back with Delph playing in left back more often than not recently. But I think it's just... there is a golfing class between Manchester City and the rest of the league. There's no doubt about that. But the golfing class that we saw between Manchester City and Tottenham is the sort of golfing class you'd expect to see between Manchester City and, let's say, a Stoke or a Crystal Palace or I don't know, Southampton maybe, although Southampton do it quite well at the moment.
Southampton were the best team to play Manchester City this whole season.
Except for Everton, who got the point.
Yeah, with the cheeky red card on Kyle Walker. That's pretty much that was a soft red. I don't like Kyle Walker, but that was a soft red.
And speaking of red cards,
oh god,
I think the referee, we've seen some poor refereeing decisions this season in the Premier League. Huddersfield's first goal in their game at the weekend had 3 offsides before the ball hit the back of the net. and none of them were called. But there were two very clear red cards in that game, and a few that you could say perhaps could have been or should have been 2 yellows sort of thing. And that's Harry Kane's tackle, which people have sort of come out and saying he's not that kind of player, though. There's no intent there, and it's like, no, but he did it.
He's reckless.
And if that
it was just reckless.
Yeah. And if a player such as, I'm just going to throw a name out there, but if a player like Joey Barton had done that, it would have been a red card without question. And I think reputation of him being a nice guy and him being a good player and a fair player shouldn't get in the way of the fact it was a really poor tackle and a really dangerous tackle. And it says a lot that tackle wasn't even the worst in the game.
No, there were 2 worse than it, and they were both by the same player, Dele Alli.
Yeah, Dele Alli is a player who I absolutely adored last season. He was fantastic. He broke onto the scene with some fantastic performances, got into the England squad. I was like, no, he's too young, he's not ready. Scored a screamer against France and just carried on that form and played absolutely brilliantly for the last season and a half sort of thing. And then this season came along, and I don't know whether it's all gone to his head. I don't know if the pressure has now got too much, but Dele Alli looks really, really rattled. Every time he goes out onto the pitch, within 5 minutes, he looks like a player that is angry, that is frustrated, like a player who basically has been wound up the entire game, but it's only taking 5 minutes for him to get to that point. And when he gets to that point, people sometimes say, this player needs to be more, he needs to get angrier, he needs to get meaner, he needs to be, a little bit more imposing on the pitch. And they used to say that about Dele Alli because he had sort of this temper, this aggression, but he didn't use it in the right way. But he's just gone so far the wrong way.
He's such a dirty player. He's such a dirty player.
Yeah. The temper and the aggression is being taken out on the opposition players, on the fans, on whoever else, and it's not being taken out in the right way, as in, some players are like this. They can wind up defenders or defensive midfielders and really get on their nerves and just really be a nuisance, start drawing tackles, getting fouled a lot, that kind of thing. But Dele Alli, he's just turning into a nuisance to himself and to Tottenham. And I honestly do fear for him, because you see it all the time with these young players. They break onto the scene, do incredibly, and suddenly something snaps, something goes wrong. And
it's like child actors too.
Yeah, and it can leave them in free fall. And we saw it with Wilf Zaha, who was doing brilliantly for Palace, got his big money move to Man United, and then basically spent the entire season on the bench because of things that happened off the pitch, and his attitude was poor and things like that. Admittedly, he's got himself back on track and he's playing brilliantly again, but it did happen. Luke Shaw at Man United at the moment, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes, why Mourinho refuses to play him, but there's obviously something going wrong. He was a young player doing really well, massively hyped up, England call-ups probably before he was ready, and he got his big money move and it didn't go to plan. Dele Alli was slightly different, that he came from MK Dons in League One and then got the move to Tottenham and then just suddenly exploded onto the scene at Tottenham, so he's already at the big club type thing. But it does seem to keep happening with young players, especially, young English players. I know Zaha is now declared for Ivory Coast, but, for a while he was thought to be one of the next England stars, and I don't know what's going on in Dele Alli's head at the moment.
He's also just not playing well. He's just not doing anything.
Yeah, he's turned into a liability for Tottenham, I feel like.
I mean, you saw it, just for people who didn't see the game. He went studs up on Kevin De Bruyne.
Studs up, over the top of the ball. It was the sort of challenge that could leave a player out injured for 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, I mean, that was a broken leg waiting to happen. That was a broken leg waiting to happen. And the fact that it wasn't even given a card is ridiculous. And another tackle, when he tackles Fernandinho. It's a rough tackle. Could have been a yellow, maybe not. But then he goes on stamps on him when Fernandinho's down. He literally leaves the cleats on Fernandinho and presses down on him as he's down. No card either. I actually can't remember. It definitely wasn't a red card. He stayed in the game. I mean, all credit to Manchester City. As soon, I mean, you're talking about a player who lets that anger and lets that passion go the other way for his team. Look at KDB. I mean, after Dele Alli tackled him, he goes and scores a screamer on the counterattack. And Dele Alli's
within seconds.
Yeah. And I don't like Man City, but I was rooting for them to destroy Tottenham because they were just playing so dirty. I mean, let's throw aside what happened with the tunnel incident, Milkgate, after the Manchester derby. But you look at the way the players behaved on the fields. I mean, even Herrera, who is a diving wanker, didn't even do anything close to what Dele Alli or some of the Tottenham players did to Man City on Saturday. And they were getting embarrassed. Manchester United were. And Tottenham, again, getting embarrassed. They just did not conduct themselves well. And I think the fact that they're in 7th right now, they're literally significantly closer. They are 5 points closer to the relegation zone than they are to Manchester City in the table. They're 21 points behind Manchester City in the table, and they are 15 points away. Sorry, they're 16 points away from the relegation zone.
And to think this is pretty much the same team that last season
got second.
Took second place at the title race right towards the end of the season. The season before, they were putting pressure on Leicester for a lot of the season before completely imploding against Chelsea. And, it's pretty much the same side. They lost Kyle Walker, sure, a big loss, but
they brought in good players. I mean, they brought in Davinson Sanchez. They brought in some good players.
Yeah, and it's bizarre because that was sort of a thing with this transfer window. None of the teams really recruited heavily. Manchester United and Chelsea, they brought in one sort of big player. Tottenham, they brought in a couple. They brought in Llorente, they brought in Aurier, and they brought in Davinson Sanchez. But Manchester City, they were the ones that I think recruited the best, and you're seeing it in the results. They signalled what they were weak in, which was wing back and goalkeeper. And what did? They brought in wing backs and a goalkeeper, and all of them have performed. And I think that is the main difference. Manchester United, they had Ibrahimovic, who I know the contract was a bit iffy at the time, but they had Rashford, they had Martial, and they went and they spent potentially up to 80 odd million on Lukaku, who's not really doing very well. And Chelsea, they had Costa. Obviously, the less said about what happened there, the better. So they knew they had to bring in a striker, so they did. But then they also sent out a fleet of players on loan, and now they've been left with a really quite small squad, despite the fact that players like Loftus-Cheek could probably get into that Chelsea side and do quite well.
Abraham as well, yeah.
Tammy Abraham as well.
They straight up sold Loftus-Cheek. They didn't even get him back.
Yeah, exactly. And whereas Manchester City, they knew that this is where we're weak, this is where we're going to strengthen. And I know some people say, Manchester City, they're buying the league, but at the end of the day, that's how football is nowadays. You're not going to win the league by buying one or two players and hoping that the rest of your team performs season to season.
And also, they've been buying players forever. And Manchester United and Chelsea have been buying players forever. But a team hasn't looked this good in a really long time. I mean, it's what Pep has done to this team, making the buys that he's done.
The only teams in my knowledge of the Premier League that have looked as unbeatable as this Manchester City side is Jose Mourinho's Chelsea side from sort of the mid-noughties.
Yeah, 95 points.
And the Arsenal Invincible side. No other side has looked anywhere near as good. Manchester United have had some amazing players over the years. Berbatov, Van Persie, and what have you. Chelsea obviously had Lampard, Liverpool had Gerrard, and they had these world-class players, but none of them had squads that look as unbeatable as Manchester City. And I honestly think that Pep's probably gone out and said, right, we're going to absolutely run away with the league, so by January it's wrapped up and we can focus on the Champions League, or we can go for a triple.
Which they could honestly
And that's exactly what he's done.
They could honestly do the quad. They could do the quad.
I honestly think that if any team in the Premier League is going to go far in the Champions League, it's Manchester City, despite the fact they're also throwing everything into the Premier League. And like Manchester City, when you actually look at their full squad, their squad depth isn't, it's not nothing overly impressive. It's not at the level of a Real Madrid, for example. But what Pep's done is he's got his sort of core 15 players, and he's got them all playing unbelievably brilliantly.
Yeah, though...
And there is not one player in that squad that you look at and think that's a weak link.
Though a fully healthy Manchester City rotated squad is about as good as you could get with any other... you look at... just the ability to swap Jesus and Aguero. You have Mendy, who's hurt. You have Company, who's in and out of fitness. Stones is hurt right now. Bravo is not. He doesn't do half bad in the Carabao Cup. You've got Gundogan. You've got Bernardo Silva. They're just an embarrassment of players. They got Danilo as well over the summer. So you're talking about maybe it's honestly closer to 20 players that could play when they're fully healthy.
Yeah, and I know I said they don't have great squad depth when compared to, in the Premier League, their squad depth is good. And I think that's probably the main difference between the Premier League and the top teams in the other divisions is that PSG, Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Juventus, they have much better squad depth. They could have their entire starting 11 injured and still put out a team that you'd be confident in. And Manchester City, they're close to that. They're not quite at that level, but they're close to that, and that's something that the Premier League has lacked for a long time, is that incredible squad depth, so that if a player gets injured, like you see it all the time nowadays in the Premier League, when the star player gets injured and suddenly the team drop off form. With Tottenham, if Harry Kane gets injured, they've lost their goal.
They honestly might get relegated if he got injured.
Because year on year, they've not brought in a backup. They tried it with Llorente this season, and last season they had Janssen, who was there. Didn't really do anything, but he was there. And, Chelsea at the same time, if they lose Hazard, although they've still got a decent team, it's not going to be a title-winning team without Hazard in. And Kante as well for Chelsea. Manchester United, they've not had squad depth for a while now, and you feel like if De Gea gets injured, who's going to come in?
Romero.
Romero can come in, but
I don't
think Romero likes being a Manchester United player. So
no, he doesn't.
And then with Arsenal, God knows what's going to happen if Sanchez and Ozil leave in January, because they do not have any kind of depth to replace players of their quality.
Yeah, in the end, you look at what Manchester City are doing, and you see teams of the quality that they're going against in the Premier League, and teams that'll play to win. Premier League football is just much more physical. It's much more taxing. Tactically, they are just outmaneuvering all of these teams, and they're doing it while being the second, third favorites to win the Champions League, which is crazy. So, Kieran, I have some questions for you that I'll also answer. Let's get to the heart of this. Obviously, Manchester City's the big name, but these are the predictions that we can make after seeing this run of form. 1, will they win the league? 2, will they go undefeated? And 3, can they beat Chelsea's 95 points record from 2005?
So 1, yes. I don't think there's any question about it now. It would have to be a monumental drop in form where half the team gets injured, Pep goes on a mission to the moon, and Chelsea suddenly buy Messi for them to not win the league at this point. I'm going to go to 3, which I think absolutely they can beat Chelsea 95 points. I think they will be the first team to break 100 points, to be completely honest with you.
Wow.
Because on this current run of form, and given the way the rest of the league is going, no one is even close to the quality of Manchester City. And that sort of leads me on to the second point. Can they do the Invincibles? If they don't do the Invincibles, given, looking at the form of every team up until this point, if they don't do the Invincibles, you could almost consider it a bad season. Because they are that much better than every other team in the league.
I agree with you.
Do I think they'll do it? I don't. I don't think they'll do the Invincibles.
It's hard.
Because I think when they start coming up against, they've already beaten the top teams in the league. But I think a team like a Chelsea or a team like a Manchester United could, not that they will, but they could easily sneak a win. And I think it's happened before where teams run away with the league early on and then teams begin to work out what you need to do to beat them. Whether that happens, I don't know. But it may even be Manchester City get really far in the Champions League and one of the teams they come up against in the Champions League exposes them, exposes a weakness, and then the Premier League teams go, hold on, that's how you beat them. That's sort of the way the game goes nowadays. You find a weakness, you expose it, you target it. At the moment, no one knows what that weakness is because Manchester City are just that good. But when they start coming up against, the Premier League teams for the second round of games, that might happen when they come up against a Barcelona or a Real Madrid. It might happen then. I think that's what it relies on. If someone can find a weakness in this Manchester City side.
Yeah, that's what it is. The reverse fixtures are there for a reason. You play every team first before playing another for the reason. I know it's not always like that in sports over here in America, and I think that's something that the Premier League does very well. I think that football does very well. So it does give them that second chance. Those home games, I mean, they have yet to play Liverpool at Anfield, which is a big thing. Obviously, you look at that game and you see the 5-0, but you also see the Mane red card like 28 minutes in. You see maybe it could have been different. Obviously, Chelsea were not in great form when they played, so those are two games I definitely look at. I would agree with you with all of those points. I actually do think that they will also break those 100 points. I mean, how could you not? But at this time, if we're answering these questions, we're agreeing. Most people are probably agreeing with us, except for the really avid Manchester City haters. Are they the best team in the world?
At the moment, yes.
Is there a team right now, if they played right now, obviously January is something different. I mean, they're going through the quarterfinals. They have Basel. So in the quarterfinals, if they were played today, the Champions League quarterfinals were played today, and they had to play a PSG or a Barca or Bayern, would you favor any of them, or would it be Man City?
I think I'd favour Man City, in all honesty, and there is one reason, and it's Kevin De Bruyne. And I know people will say Ronaldo and Messi, they're the best two players in the world. Generally, yes, but right now, Kevin De Bruyne is the best player in the world. He's playing better than anyone. And I don't think anyone could really argue with that. Messi and Ronaldo, of course, they're always going to play well, but they're not playing at their godlike levels that we've seen in the past. They're both getting older now. They're both sort of below their peak, I would say. And I said it to you sort of around the time, it was over the weekend after the game, that I think a lot of people have been saying Neymar is the man who's going to win the next Ballon d'Or after Ronaldo and Messi. On current showing, I don't think it will be. I think it will be De Bruyne.
If Man City run a treble this year, De Bruyne will win. And I think they can do it. I mean, you look at that game, the passes he makes. You're talking about he gets the ball on the opposite touchline. He's by the stands. He's by the fans. He's behind the halfway line. And he spots Delph or Sane bombing down the opposite touchline, 20, 25 yards ahead of him. And he puts the perfect weight on the pass. It takes one bounce, rolls perfectly at the feet of Sane, and he crosses it in, and Manchester City gets a shot on target. A couple of those.
At the moment, De Bruyne
is just amazing.
At the moment, De Bruyne is playing with the passing ability of Pirlo, but with the pace and the attacking ability of someone like Ronaldo, and that's scary.
It's scary, and he's so good. He's so good defensively too. He just wins so many balls back.
And I think that's just, he is the complete midfielder. We talk about Kroos is the best midfielder in the world, or some people would say Modric or whoever. But De Bruyne, I think he's just on another level at the moment. Kroos and Modric are great. Iniesta back in his day was great. But I think with all of them, you could pick out an area they're weak in. Iniesta was physically, he was quite a small player. With Kroos and Modric, they've got flaws as well. But De Bruyne, it's so difficult to pick out a weakness in his game because, he's not the quickest player in the world, but he's far from slow. He can strike a ball unbelievably well. His passing is, as I said, on the level of Pirlo at the moment, but at the same time, he can track back, he can defend, maybe not to the level of an N'Golo Kante, but certainly to the level of any other centre midfielder in the world at the moment.
He reminds me of
defence midfielders.
He reminds me of. He reminds me of a Schweinsteiger with the technical ability of a Pirlo and an Iniesta. I mean,
Yeah.
he's that commanding force. I mean, he may not be the captain. David Silva and company are the captains of Manchester City, but he reminds me of that authoritative force on the field, that passion, that physicality, that unbelievable stamina, box-to-box midfielder like the Schweinsteiger. And then you add the technical ability of the best Spanish and the best Italian midfielders of this recent generation. And you get KDB. And the scariest thing is that he's probably not even in his prime yet. I mean, how old is he? He's what, 24?
No. 20... I'm going to Google it. I'm going to Google it right now. Because this is a big thing. I think he might be 25. Here we go. KDB.
He is 26, actually. Sorry, he's 26.
26.
So he's 26, but still. I mean, midfielders, you've seen it with Modric. I mean, he is the best midfielder for Real Madrid right now this season. Well, him and Kroos. And Modric is 30, approaching 31. So midfielders age very well. So this is the start of something very special for De Bruyne.
Yeah, and I think we saw, the rise to prominence of many a midfielder recently. Players like Hazard, like Neymar, like not so long ago, players like Ozil and Kroos. When those German players started flying through and they became the dominant force they are. And I think that Kevin De Bruyne, although he had a slightly mixed start, going to Chelsea. Chelsea didn't think he was good enough. They sold him off to Wolfsburg, I think it was.
Yeah, Wolfsburg.
And then he got his head down, started playing well, and started ripping apart the Bundesliga, and then got his big money move to Manchester City. And I think there was a lot of sort of raised eyebrows. Is he worth the money? Have Manchester City just done their usual thing of overpaying for a player who's not good enough? Because at the time, I know it's not like this now, but at the time, Sterling and Stones weren't living up to their price tags and things like that. And I think what he's done is come into a side that was already very good, and he's brought them to a new level. And I think the way he's developed, from the start of last season to the start of this season even, he looks like a completely different player. He looks like... He genuinely looks like a Frank Lampard in his prime.
Yeah. That's big.
Frank Lampard was that kind of player who could... Yeah, Frank Lampard was that kind of player who could pick out a pass from anywhere, who could, strike. I think if I were to compare the two, both like Lampard in his prime and De Bruyne now, I would say that De Bruyne has the better pass, Lampard has the better shot type thing. But that's the sort of level I think he's at the moment. Is very similar to Lampard, very similar to Gerrard as well. That kind of level. Defensively, maybe not quite the level of Paul Scholes type thing, but he is definitely the level of sort of that golden trio of English midfielders that everyone loves.
And he is into his own now, I think, a lot in part because of what Pep has done. It took some time. Obviously, last year they finished third. People thought they might win. They had their January, December collapse that they're kind of known for. That's clearly not happening this season. And Pep's system takes time, but it works. You saw it at Barcelona. You saw it at Bayern. And now he's doing this in what people said was the most competitive league. Oh, we couldn't do it. Oh, he's managing, one team, the one team leagues or two team leagues. But no, he's doing it in the Premier League. And he's doing it in resounding fashion. Perhaps even more convincingly than he did at those previous two clubs. Obviously, everyone agrees he's the best manager in the world. But I think with what he's doing now, you have to consider if Pep is one of the best, if not the best manager ever. Because he is doing things and creating a style of football that no one else is playing. And that no one else can play.
I think what happened with Pep is last season, a lot of people thought, can he do it in the Premier League? And I think last season, a lot of people thought, maybe he can't. Maybe it is just a case of these leagues were much easier than the Premier League. But what I think ended up happening is, Manchester City, they dropped off of the pace quite early on. And he spent that time, really focusing on what it is about the Premier League that makes it so difficult, what the weaknesses are of each of the teams, that sort of thing, where he needs to strengthen, what he needs to train his players in. There was a video that came online of him coaching Raheem Sterling, and he was so hands-on, and he was, right with Raheem, and, going, I think you should do this, you should do this, you should do that, that kind of thing. You couldn't hear what he was saying, but you knew that he's coaching every single player individually. to improve their game, to get the best out of them. And that's exactly what he's doing. Raheem Sterling last season wasn't a £50 million player. He was struggling to live up to, a £10 million player. But this season, suddenly £50 million seems like a bargain because he's absolutely flying, and he's looking like the kind of player that could play for any side and get into the first team. The same with Sane. The same with Jesus. The same with David Silva. Like David Silva, a lot of people thought he was past his best, and there was rumours of him going off and sort of going to some lower league teams in across Europe.
But he's back.
And then this season he's having one of the best seasons of his career.
And I think,
it's because Pep is spending the time with every single player, individually coaching them and getting the best out of them individually before getting them as a team. And I think a lot of managers, they prefer to work on the team structure first. And I think that's where Pep slightly differs. And I think that's why so often with a Pep Guardiola team, you find individual brilliance from players that you didn't necessarily expect it from.
Because it's all down to the tactics. It's all down to what everyone's good at. I mean, with David Silva, you saw him. He is the man who helped City win the titles, and he dropped off a little bit, like you said. But he's back. I mean, City fans agree unanimously. He's the best player to have ever put on a City shirt. And obviously, City don't have a lot of history, but that's still a big honor for a player, especially not an English player. And Pep has really energized David Silva this season to become that captain, that man, the man that you associate with Manchester City. And, he said, but David Silva said himself, he wants to stay here for as long as possible. He wants to become Mr. Manchester City. And with the way the team is going, I can see it happening. I mean, Pep's is
I think the players are falling in love with the club. Mm-hmm. And that is something that is priceless at the end of the day. If a player loves a club, they're going to play their heart in every single game. And I think that's what's happening. In Manchester City, they've been accused of buying the league, of just spending money constantly. But if you actually look at the players, they love playing for Manchester City.
I think that's the biggest difference. That's the biggest difference.
And I think that's the biggest difference. You see so many players nowadays that they're playing great football for a big team, and yet they still want to force a move away. Diego Costa's the one that comes to mind immediately. He's had some great seasons at Chelsea, and yet, Antonio Conte and him had a falling out, and suddenly he's trying to force a move away. Has spent half a season not playing because
he doesn't want to play for Chelsea.
Yeah. And you see it not so much with Coutinho recently, because at the end of the day, he wants to move to Barcelona, but at the end of the day, he's still coming out and he's putting in one hell of a shift for Liverpool every week. You've seen it with Sanchez recently as well. But the thing is, you don't hear it with players at Manchester City. Players want to go to Manchester City. Players don't want to leave Manchester City, and it's because they love playing for them. And that's why Manchester City are going to win the league.
Yeah, and it's now the really truest statement that Manchester is blue, and United fans are definitely going to have to suck on that for a while because I don't see this rain coming over anytime soon. And that is why we believe that Manchester City right now are the best team in the world, why they'll win the league, why they will potentially go on an Invincibles run, and why they will break 100 points for the first time in Premier League history. So there you have it, a tactical analysis of Manchester City.
Brilliantly done, might I add.
Well done, sir. So without further ado,
let's move on. No, went for it at the same time. Let's move on to our team of the week. Starting with the goalkeeper.
Yes.
Do you want to kick us off?
Oh, yes. So we've got Ulrich for Bayern Munich. A lot has been made of him, especially earlier in the season. Neuer goes down. He's going to be down for another couple months. And they're saying, who is this guy? He's not great. I've seen Bayern matches. He was not good at the start of the season. But now he's putting in shifts. Only 4 saves over the weekend. But Bayern were able to eke out those wins that you need to maintain your lead in the league. And that's a 1-0 win at a tough opponent. And Ulrich makes the save. Late pen. Totally not the greatest pen, but he saved it. Keeps the 1-0 win. Keeps the 3 points. Things are moving forward. We'll take it away. Give us your best defenders of the week.
So we mentioned him earlier. Our EFL player of the week, Keogh for Derby, with a great performance. Pushed them above Villa in the table, as well as beating Villa in that Midlands Derby game. And we've also got Marcus Alonso, for Chelsea, who scored that just inch-perfect free kick against Southampton, which got Chelsea the 3 points. Questions could be asked of the goalkeeping and the defending and things like that. But you still need a little bit of skill and a lot of vision to be able to pull off the free kick that he did. And then, as well as Alonso, we have Marcelo for Real Madrid, arguably the best left back in the world. So no surprises to see him in the team of the week. I'm sure it won't be the last time that we see him over the course of this season and seasons to come. Just a fantastic player, fantastic performance again at the weekend. And yeah, do you want to take us on to the midfield?
Actually, we'll skip the midfield for now because it is 5 players, a little bit of a giveaway. So an ironic pairing up front, a little bit of a throwback to just last season. We've got Luis Suarez and Neymar. Suarez had a great weekend, 2 goals in the Barcelona's 4-0 win, making the runs, pressing up forward, starting up counters, looking like the Suarez of old. He's found his form back. People said it would happen, and indeed it has happened. And then Neymar, the $220 million man. Neymar looking fantastic for PSG. 2 goals, 2 assists, absolute battering over the weekend, and he has just continued to energize that team, potentially making up another fantastic front three. Once Mbappe grows into his own, Cavani is an incredible, probably the most underrated striker in the world, but that front three is going to be a force for time to come if all 3 of them stay at PSG, which I think Cavani will, because he does love the club. And now, on to the midfield. We've got Coutinho, Liverpool fan favorite. He had an assist and a goal over the weekend, and he also almost scored an incredible free kick, just an inch wide, hitting off the post. He ran the offense, 4-0 win, much needed for Liverpool. They are now even on goal differential with Chelsea, giving them the 3rd best goal differential in the league. If they win their next game, they will be that much closer to securing that 3rd place spot and challenging for 2nd in the league, which should be Liverpool's goal for the end of the season. Hopefully Coutinho can stay until the end, and we'll toss it off to you, Kieran, for the rest of the midfield.
So we have the duo from Manchester City. We've talked about one of them a lot today, and that's Kevin De Bruyne. Fantastic performance, just absolutely ran riot, firing off passes left, right, and centre, and half of them were just breathtaking passes. And then one of his teammates, Raheem Sterling, having the season of his life at the moment, scoring so many goals, assisting goals. He's just running riot at the moment, and it's looking like a really world-class player. I think for the first time since he sort of broke onto the scene, and people thought this guy is pretty good, he is starting to show that potential, show the ability that his potential suggested. And then rounding off the Premier League players in our midfield, it's a very Premier League dominated midfield. We have Aaron Moy for Huddersfield, who bagged himself a brace, I believe, at the weekend. Scored 2 great goals, is really coming into his own this season. Huddersfield got him quite cheap from Manchester City, which says a lot given it's from Manchester City, a team that doesn't do cheap. They had him on loan while they were in the Championship. He dominated the Championship, and now he's come up and he's doing really well in the Premier League. And
great story.
A really great story for a player who's really playing well at the moment. And finally, another one from Madrid, it's Luka Modric. We spoke about him earlier. He's just one of the best midfielders in the world, and he, again, just had a fantastic game, dominating the midfield and showing why Real Madrid were right to steal him from Tottenham all those years ago, because he has just become an absolute midfield maestro ever since.
And that is our team of the week. And it's no surprise that my personal player of the week, one that Kieran will agree with as well, is Kevin De Bruyne. He was absolutely everywhere. Not much more can be said. And I think with something that you don't see on the stat sheet is the fact that he was just so in charge of that game. And the minute that Dele Alli came in with that tackle, a switch flipped. And De Bruyne said, we're not just going to win this game by 1 or 2 goals. We're going to batter Tottenham. We're going to batter them and embarrass them. Honestly, the score was 4-1, but it probably should have been 8-1. It should have been even worse. And that is just a testament to what Man City does, and that's a testament to how De Bruyne is a powerhouse in that midfield. He's a player of the week. He should be the front runner right now for this season's Ballon d'Or, and I think we're going to see even more impressive performances from him here on out. And that is a wrap for our week. Kieran, I know we have the holidays coming up, so you want to give them the kind of the rundown what we're going to be covering the next time we do end up recording.
Yeah, so there's not going to be a show next week, of course.
Happy holidays,
our usual
everyone.
Our usual recording day is a Monday, which just happens to be the lovely day of Christmas. So whatever you celebrate on this day or in this period, we hope you have a fantastic time and a fantastic new year as well, because our first show after today will be coming the first week of the new year.
Yeah.
So during that period, we'll wrap up all of the festive periods games and probably take a look ahead at some of the potential January transfers we might expect to see, because the day we record our next show, the transfer window will be open.
Exactly. So there's that to look forward to. Can't forget an El Clasico recap. We'll check in with Manchester City and the other league leaders at that time, as well as giving you our team of the year on January.
Oh, yes.
With our personal player of the year. Hint, hint, it is not Messi or Ronaldo, because we're not the Ballon d'Or voters. So you have that to look forward to as well.
Absolutely. And we'll also be taking a look at the EFL action over the holiday period, as well as taking a quick look at some of the potential EFL transfers. And we won't be doing an EFL team of the year, because that would just be too difficult.
And exactly, that's great. So for all of you football fans out there, whether you support an EFL team, Premier League team, or a team not even in the top 5 leagues, hope you enjoy your football over this holiday break. Hope you get some goodies for Christmas or whatever you celebrate, whether that's Football Manager, FIFA, or Pro Evolution Soccer. Happy holidays to all. Happy all.
That was so bad, but so good.
Happy holidays to everyone out there. So for this 2017, the first 3 episodes of On The Volley have been a blast, Kieran. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, yes.
I can't wait to keep doing this in the new year. So until then, for 2017, I am Paolo Santamaria. He's Kieran Lacey. And we are On The Volley.